She gave everything, then she was left alone. Mary was 72 years old. It was 5:10 a.m. in a small American town. The streets were cold and empty. Mary sat quietly on a bus stop bench, holding a small worn-out bag. Inside that bag were old clothes, and a few faded photographs from a life she once had. Mary had spent her entire life working for one purpose: her children. Her husband had passed away many years ago. After that, Mary worked 2 jobs for almost 4 decades. During the day, she cleaned offices. At night, she worked at a nursing home, caring for other people's parents. She was tired, but she never complained. She believed it was a mother's duty to sacrifice so her children could have a better future. And she did exactly that. Her children grew up in America. They went to good schools. They built careers. They had families of their own. Mary thought she had done her part. She believed that when old age came, her right would be care, respect, and a little love. But that morning, Mary was holding an eviction notice. Her rent was overdue. Her hospital bills were unpaid. Her pension was not enough to survive. She called her oldest son first. The phone rang, but no one answered. Then she called her daughter. Voicemail. One by one, she called every number she had saved. Silence. Mary looked at the sky as the sun slowly rose. Her eyes were dry, not because she felt no pain, but because she had cried too many nights before. In America, parents give everything without conditions. But children often forget that caring for their parents is not charity. It is a responsibility. And that responsibility had failed Mary. When silence became the answer, Mary stayed on that bench for almost an hour. Cars passed by. People walked quickly, wrapped in coats, busy with their own lives. No one noticed the old woman sitting quietly with her bag and her thoughts. Mary checked her phone again. Still no missed calls. Still no messages. She remembered a time when her phone never stopped ringing. Back then, her children called her for everything. Homework help. Money. Late-night advice. Emergency rides. Mary was always there. When her son lost his first job, she paid his rent. When her daughter got divorced, Mary let her move back in. When the grandchildren were born, Mary became the free babysitter. She never asked for anything in return. In her mind, this was love. This was a mother's duty. But years passed, and things slowly changed. Her children started calling less. Visits became holidays only. Then holidays became excuses. Mary told herself they were busy. That was the American life, she thought. Fast. Demanding. Self-centered. The truth was harder. Her children believed something dangerous. That once parents grow old, they become a burden. They assumed the government would take care of her. That social services would step in. That someone else would handle what they no longer wanted to face. But America's system is not built on love. It is built on paperwork. When Mary got sick, the bills came fast. When she couldn't work anymore, the income stopped. When the rent increased, no one helped. And when she finally needed her children the most, they chose silence. Mary looked at her phone one last time and whispered, "I never left you." A parent's right is not luxury. It is dignity. And a child's responsibility does not end with adulthood. That morning, Mary stood up slowly. She had nowhere to go. But she still hoped that someone somewhere would remember her. A place that was not home. Mary walked slowly through the cold streets. Her legs were weak, and her hands trembled as she held her bag. Every step reminded her that she was no longer young, and that America was not kind to people who could no longer produce. After almost an hour, she reached a small building with a faded sign. Community shelter. She stood outside for a long moment. Asking for help had never been part of her life. She had always been the one helping others. Inside, the air smelled of old coffee and disinfectant. A tired-looking woman at the desk asked her name and age. Mary answered quietly, ashamed for reasons she did not fully understand. The shelter was crowded. Families sat on plastic chairs. Men stared at the floor. Women held children close, trying to hide their fear. Mary was given a thin blanket and a number. Not a room. Not a bed. Just a number. That night, Mary lay on a narrow cot, listening to coughing, crying, and whispered prayers. The ceiling above her was cracked. The light never fully turned off. She closed her eyes and remembered her old house. The kitchen where she cooked for her children. The sofa where she fell asleep waiting for them to come home late at night. None of that existed anymore. At the shelter, no one asked about her past. No one cared how much she had given to her family. Here, everyone was equally forgotten. Mary held her bag tightly to her chest. Inside were the photographs of her children smiling. She wondered if they ever thought of her. In America, independence is praised. But when independence turns into abandonment, the elderly pay the highest price. Mary whispered into the darkness. Is this what my life has become? Tears finally came. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet tears that soaked into the thin pillow. That night, Mary did not dream. She only waited for morning. The stranger who looked twice. Morning arrived quietly at the shelter. People began to move, fold blankets, and line up for coffee. Mary sat on her cot, staring at her hands. They were rough, tired, and marked by years of work. As she slowly stood up, her legs gave way. She would have fallen. But someone caught her arm. Are you okay? A soft voice asked. Mary looked up and saw a woman in her early 40s. She wore a simple coat and carried a clipboard. Her name badge read Sarah, social worker. I'm fine, Mary whispered, though her face told a different story. Sarah helped her sit down and handed her a cup of warm tea. She didn't rush. She didn't look away. That alone felt strange. Most people avoided eye contact with the homeless. Looking meant feeling, and feeling meant responsibility. Sarah asked simple questions. How old are you? Do you have family? Are you sick? Mary hesitated at the word family. Yes, she said finally. I have children. Sarah nodded gently. Do they know you're here? Mary looked down. They don't answer. Something changed in Sarah's eyes. Not pity. Understanding. She had seen this story before. Sarah explained the system. Forms, waiting lists, shelters, temporary housing. None of it sounded human. It sounded mechanical. Still, Sarah tried. She arranged a medical checkup. She found a short-term bed for Mary in a quieter room. It wasn't a home, but it was safer. Before leaving, Sarah asked one more question. Would you like me to contact your children? Mary's hands shook. For a moment, hope rose in her chest. Dangerous, fragile hope. Then she remembered the silence. The unanswered calls. The excuses. No, Mary said softly. I don't want to force anyone to care. Sarah respected her answer. But as she walked away, she turned back and said, You deserve better than this. For the first time in weeks, someone had said that to Mary. And for the first time, Mary allowed herself to believe that maybe her story wasn't over yet. The call that changed everything. Sarah did not sleep well that night. Mary's face stayed in her mind. The quiet strength, the hidden pain, the dignity slowly being taken away. As a social worker, Sarah had rules. Clear rules. Emotional distance was one of them. But Mary's case felt different. The next morning, Sarah sat at her desk, staring at the file. 3 names were listed under emergency contacts. 3 children. 3 phone numbers. Mary had said no. She didn't want to force anyone to care. Sarah hesitated. Then she picked up the phone. The first number rang. And went to voicemail. The second rang longer. Hello? A man's voice finally answered. Sarah introduced herself calmly. I'm calling about your mother, Mary. There was a pause. She's fine, right? The man asked, unsure. Sarah took a breath. No, she said honestly. She's staying at a shelter. Silence filled the line. She never told us things were that bad, he replied. Sarah's voice was steady but firm. She did. You just didn't hear her. The call ended without a promise. An hour later, the phone rang again. It was Mary's daughter. Her voice shook as she spoke. I didn't know it was this serious. Sarah replied gently. Knowing and acting are not the same. That afternoon, Sarah went to see Mary. I made a call, she said carefully. Mary's face went pale. Her hands trembled. I told you I didn't want. I know, Sarah interrupted softly. But sometimes silence hurts more than truth. Mary turned away, ashamed. Years of pride pressed down on her chest. What if they don't come? Mary whispered. What if they come only because they feel guilty? Sarah answered honestly. Then you will finally know where you stand. That night, Mary sat by the small window of her temporary room. Outside, cars passed, lives moved forward. For the first time, the waiting was different. Heavier. More real. Because now, the door between her and her children was no longer closed by distance. It was closed by choice. And when they finally came, the next afternoon, the shelter door opened slowly. Mary was sitting near the window, staring outside, pretending not to hope. Then she heard familiar voices. Her heart stopped. Her son walked in first. Older now. Well-dressed. Busy-looking. Behind him was her daughter, eyes red, arms crossed tightly. For a moment, no one spoke. Mary stood up slowly. Her legs trembled, but she forced a small smile. I didn't think you would come, she said softly. Her son looked uncomfortable. We didn't know things were this bad, he replied. Mary nodded. I told you, she said. But you were always busy. The words were calm, but they carried years of pain. Her daughter finally spoke. Mom, you should have asked for help. Mary's smile faded. I did, she said. I just didn't beg. Silence filled the room. They talked about bills, work, children, schedules. Everything except the real issue. Finally, Mary asked the question that had lived in her heart for years. When I couldn't work anymore. When I got sick. Why did you stop calling? Her son looked down. We thought you were strong. We thought you'd manage. Mary took a deep breath. Being strong does not mean being alone, she said. And being your mother did not end when you grew up. Her daughter's eyes filled with tears. But she said nothing. After a while, her son cleared his throat. We can help a little. Maybe some money. We'll see. Mary felt something break inside her. She had not raised her children to offer charity. She had raised them to understand responsibility. I don't need your money, Mary said quietly. I needed you. The visit ended without hugs. Without promises. As the door closed behind them, Mary sat down slowly. The truth was finally clear. They had come. But they had not returned. Letting go of who they were. That night, Mary did not cry. She sat quietly on her bed, holding the same photographs she had carried for years. Her children smiling. Her arms around them. A past that felt like it belonged to someone else. For a long time, Mary had blamed herself. She thought maybe she had asked for too little. Or loved too much. But now, the truth was clear. Her children were not cruel. They were distant. And distance, when mixed with comfort, slowly turns into neglect. Mary realized something painful but freeing. She could not force love. She could not demand responsibility from people who had chosen convenience. The next morning, Sarah returned. She found Mary sitting calmly, her bag packed. I've been thinking, Mary said. I don't want to wait anymore. Sarah listened carefully. I don't want to spend what time I have left hoping someone will change, Mary continued. I want peace. Sarah nodded. I may have an option, she said. There's a small assisted living home. It's not perfect, but it's stable. Mary asked one question. Will I be alone? Sarah smiled gently. No, she said. There are others like you. That afternoon, Mary signed the papers.
No dramatic goodie.
No final phone calls. Just acceptance. As she left the shelter, Mary looked back once. Not with anger. Not with sadness. With clarity. Family, she now understood, is not only about blood. It is about presence. It is about showing up when it matters. Mary placed the photographs back into her bag. She would keep them, not as promises, but as memories. For the first time in a long while, Mary was not waiting for anyone. She was moving forward. Finding warmth in unexpected places. The assisted living home was small and quiet. It wasn't the place Mary had imagined growing old in, but it was clean, warm, and calm. Her room had a single bed, a small window, and a wooden chair. Nothing fancy. But for the first time in months, the door closed behind her with safety, not fear. The other residents were just like her. Men and women who had lived full lives. Worked hard, raised families, and then slowly faded from attention. At dinner, Mary met Ruth, a woman her age with sharp eyes and a gentle laugh. They talked about small things at first. Weather, food, old TV shows. Then Ruth said something that stayed with Mary. "My kids live 10 minutes away," Ruth said. "I see them twice a year." Mary nodded. No explanation was needed. Days passed, and routines formed. Morning coffee. Group walks down the hallway. Afternoon music that reminded everyone of younger days. Mary began helping again. She listened to stories. She held hands. She comforted those who felt invisible. For the first time in years, she felt useful. Not as a worker. Not as a babysitter. But as a human being. One evening, Mary received a call. It was her daughter. "I heard you moved," she said. Her voice sounded distant. "Yes," Mary replied calmly.
I'm settled.
There was a pause. "We should visit sometime," her daughter added. Mary looked around her room. At the quiet peace she had found. "Maybe," Mary said. "Whenever you truly want to." After the call ended, Mary felt no anger.
No sadness.
Just relief. In this small place, among strangers, Mary had found something she lost long ago. Respect. And sometimes, respect heals deeper wounds than love ever could. Her story became a mirror. 300 words. Weeks passed quietly. Mary became part of the assisted living home in a way she never expected. She wasn't loud. She wasn't dramatic. But people noticed her. They noticed how she listened. How she remembered names. How she showed care without asking for anything in return. One afternoon, a young nurse sat beside her. "My grandmother doesn't talk to us anymore," the nurse said softly. "She says we forgot her." Mary looked at her with kind eyes. "Did you forget her?" she asked. "Or did life convince you that later would always come?" The nurse had no answer. Word spread slowly. Residents began sharing their stories with Mary. Different lives, same ending. Children who were busy. Families who assumed someone else would handle it. Mary realized her pain was not unique. It was common. One evening, the home invited families for a small gathering. Some residents had visitors. Some didn't. Mary sat calmly, not expecting anything. Sarah, the social worker, came by. "You've helped more people than you know," she said. "Sometimes stories change minds." Mary smiled gently. "I don't want pity," she replied. "I want people to remember." That night, Mary wrote a short letter. Not to her children, but to anyone willing to listen. It spoke about responsibility. About dignity. About how parents give without contracts. But children should never forget their duty. Mary understood something powerful. If her children had not learned, perhaps others still could. And that, in its own quiet way, was enough. What remains when everything is gone? Mary never became famous. There were no headlines.
No apologies. No sudden reunions.
But something else happened. Her story stayed. It stayed in the minds of the nurses who called their parents more often. It stayed with the families who visited a little longer. It stayed with the residents who felt less alone. Mary lived simply. Morning sunlight by the window. Warm tea in the afternoon. Quiet conversations that mattered more than noise. Her children visited once more. They were polite. Awkward. Distant. Mary welcomed them without bitterness. She did not accuse. She did not beg. She had learned that peace does not come from changing others. It comes from accepting the truth. Before they left, Mary said one thing. "I gave you my strength when you needed it. Now I need dignity. Please remember that. They nodded. Whether they understood or not, Mary no longer needed proof. In America, society teaches independence, but it forgets interdependence. Parents are not investments. They are not responsibilities to be delayed. They are living histories. Mary spent her final years surrounded by people who saw her, not as a burden, but as a person. And that became her quiet victory. Because in the end, what truly matters is not how much we are loved, but how we are treated, when we can no longer give anything back. The end.